Hello everybody, welcome to the Boxing Science Podcast. This episode is the start of a new feature where we're going to be sharing 10 to 20 minute clips from the content that we've amassed over the years. So there's going to be bite-sized pockets of information and knowledge taken from different practitioners that we've interviewed over the past few years, and also our own content and delivery on different workshops. This will be perfect to listen to if you're going out on a walk, doing jobs around the house, or on your commute to work. We're going to kick things off talking about injury prevention or reducing the likelihood of injury in boxing. And this is taken from the Boxing Science Summit that we recorded in 2019, where myself, Alan Ruddock, physiologist, Dan Lawrence, strength and conditioning coach, Scott Robinson, who's a nutritionist, and Ron Madden, who's a physiotherapist. Now, the reason why I said about their titles and what they do is because the reason for doing this was to have a roundtable discussion and coming from different perspectives. It's a fantastic piece of content. If you haven't watched it yet, go head over to our YouTube channel, type in Boxing Science Summit 2019. You can watch the 90-minute full version of it. Now, the reason why we're going to be talking about injury prevention today is because as athletes are returning back to training, they're at high risk of picking up either minor or even maybe major injuries. The reason why is because over the past 10-12 weeks in lockdown, they will be in a detrained state. No matter how much training they've done at home, when they go back into boxing training, it's a period of time where they have been detrained and will not be able to meet the demands of the boxing sessions that they were doing before lockdown. Also, there's going to be a spike in training load, and this increase in training load is often associated with illness, fatigue, and possible injuries. Another one is the diet and the nutrition. You need to make sure that you're fueling your sessions in the right way, and also, if you're an increased body mass, you need to manage your training around training with increased body mass, increased forces going through your joints as you run. Also, you don't want to be crashing off the diet. So there are a few points to be taken in during lockdown. This is coming from a more general standpoint, and you get the perspectives from myself and Alan, Rob being a physiotherapist, Dan being a strength and conditioning coach, and also Scott being a nutritionist. So the next subject that I want to talk about, I'm going to use your expertise here, the common injuries in boxing, and how can these be easily prevented?
Well, this is obviously a gigantic topic and we need a day and we could all talk about it for a day. To put it in a nutshell, if I can, which is not easy, rather than common injuries, I think the most common reason we get issues is because of inappropriate training load monitoring. So there's too quick a spike, or as we were talking about earlier, there's too much sparring coupled with too much S&C, and the cup is too full. And 9 times out of 10, this is what I see. And what can be frustrating for us is managing that around common injuries, particularly around training load issues. We see issues with the shoulder and the lower back typically, and elbow and wrist articular issues we commonly get. So I think a lot of the topics we've already talked about: training load monitoring, communication as a team, knowing when to pull back. Those are some of those key things that we really need to get right. And I don't necessarily need to talk on those because we've already covered them well. I think again with managing a boxer in a team, it's about being confident when to pull them back and giving them the right type of exercise as priorities. Because we've all studied and we were academic, and you can have an ideal in your head. I've always got that ideal, and I know you have, and you guys as well. Okay, I might say this guy's got a reactive tendinopathy as a result of his third week in sparring was too heavy a spike, and he was also overdoing it in the gym. and now I'm dealing with a reactive tendinopathy of the shoulder. So how am I going to approach this? Because we're in the early part of a camp. So I might say there's 8 exercises that are key for him to do, coupled up with mobility, and the reality is he's probably not going to do them all. And I know you get a degree of hesitancy from a lot of fighters that, I don't want to do all of that, it will make it worse, or they're a bit tentative about doing too much. So for me, just like Dan said earlier, find your window to get the rehab in, and rather than be reactive to that injury, try and be proactive. So at the end of a spar or at the end of a boxing session, he's just finished on the bag, add in some banded pull aparts, add in some triple threats, add in some neck conditioning to help prevent issues there. Because the reality is, if you write an injury prevention program for boxers to do twice a week, they're not going to do it. Yeah. So find your windows to put it in, and there's no easy way of doing it, but that would be my kind of nutshell, really. Just to be realistic.
I think that's spot on, Rob, and I think you hit the nail on the head there about being proactive and not reactive. You know, you're not reacting to a certain issue once the issue arises, because the wheels are very much in motion in terms of a camp then, and it's very hard to then make an intervention whilst you've got all this additional stress. So we can obviously do a basic needs analysis of the sport, and we've all worked in this sport for a long period of time, and common things tend to occur, you know, whether let's start at the top, whether it's around the shoulder complex, whether it's around the thoracic spine influencing the shoulder, whether we're then looking at the lumbar spine, what's going on around the pelvic region. And so, we tend to see common patterns. So that's where we can make an intervention. And that's why I alluded to the microdosing earlier around those key patterns, that we can get a bit of a win there. And it is only 15 minutes in and around their sparring sessions. Once, like you said, they're already warm, they're already mobile. But going to the specifics of injury, again, I say specifics, but in a general broad term of our sport, the shoulders are obviously, I know you did the boxer's shoulder last year on this very conference, and which was awesome. So I think the basic way of looking at it is these guys are so anteriorly dominant and overloaded through their high boxing volumes, is how can we get a bit of a win? Okay, well, there's some key areas that we can speak about, maybe in and around, the pec minor. We can release that. That's going to stop the shoulder kicking forwards. Obviously the pec minor's linked in with the scapula in terms of scapula tilting forwards. We can get our banded pull aparts in. We can then look at our trunk. We can look at what's going on at the hips. So there's key areas there that we can absolutely influence with our programming. So it's just, again, being smart with our program and looking at the specifics of our sport, and then making an intervention from there on in.
One thing you're saying about like trying to get in the mobility training, I do the same warm up every single session, and it's I really focus on rotational mobility, shoulder mobility, hip mobility, and glute strength, and that's and they know the routine. So sometimes when we're busy at the gym, I'm upstairs doing the conditioning work with somebody. I'll come downstairs, and let's say I'm 5 minutes late. I'm sorry everyone, but sometimes 5 minutes late, I'll walk in. The athlete's already there. They're already there doing the eagles, doing the windmills.
And it's so pleasing, isn't it, to see as a coach.
It's brilliant.
Like we have, I do it very, very similar. We have our movement prep, move with the purpose to improve. We want to own certain positions, etc. And when an athlete, again, I'll refer to Conor Ben because he is brilliant in this regard. I see him at BXR on a separate day because we found that he was burning out a little bit on the set days that we did have. So we then changed, we intervened and changed his training day. So he comes and sees me at a different gym. I don't see him at the Matchroom gym anymore. And I say, look, I've got a limited time. You have to get here earlier. And he gets here earlier. He's there on a foam roller. He's doing his work. He's mobilising his T-spine. He's moving and grooving. And it's so pleasing for a coach to see an athlete do that. And a case in point again on that one is John Doherty. He won't mind me saying this. Very new in the relationship. So John Doherty turned over from the amateurs. He's really brought into this overall process of strength conditioning, and he's doing very well with it, both in the gym and in the ring. And one of my colleagues had to train him. I had to go away with a client for a couple of weeks, and one of my colleagues, James Collins at BXR, said he'd come in and run the program with John, and John needed a session. And I knew John wasn't doing his warm-ups, all right? Because he was the first guy I saw at the Matchroom gym. And I'd say, Doc, have you done your warm-up strategy? Yeah, Dan, I've done it. feel good. All right, John, let's get cracking then, okay? Anyway, my mate messages me, says, Dan, I don't know what the hell you've got him doing for these warm-ups, mate, because he does not know your warm-up routine. And I called him that night. I said, Doc, you've let me down, mate, in front of one of my colleagues. You haven't executed. And he said, Dan, I'm sorry, mate. And now warm-up flows. He's really brought into it, but it took that little bit of a, situation for him to do that.
Good stuff.
In terms of injuries, you mentioned vitamin D just a few minutes ago. Do you think that nutrition has an important role to play in injury prevention or injury reduction and even recovery from injury?
Yeah, 100%. I think if the nutrition isn't right, then you greatly increase the risk of illness and also injury. I think that's where the testing comes in useful. Like I said, with the DEXA scan, we can take a look at bone mineral density. And we know if that's quite low or not within the optimal range, and it's something that we can work on during the early stages of camp when the boxer might just be coming back in to boost that bone mineral density into the optimal range. And then through appropriate nutrition, and then they can start their kind of heavy phase of camp in a good position. I think hydration is absolutely key. I see a lot of time in boxing that athletes will weigh themselves after training and take that as their true weight. And as a result of knowing that they're going to weigh after training, they won't drink much during training because they think, well, I'll be lighter afterwards. When actually they could be training between 2% and 10% dehydrated. We know that the greater the severity or degree of the dehydration, the more risk of injury. So I'll always have the fighters weigh first thing in the morning fasted, just because that's the most accurate representation of true weight. And then during sparring or whatever training it is, I have them weigh themselves before and after and try and be no more than 2 to 3% dehydrated whilst training. And again, that can greatly reduce the risk of injury and also mean they can get a lot more from their session in terms of output too.
The main thing that you said with, in terms of preventing injury, well, most people watching this would be thinking, it's going to drop an exciting like mobility exercise drills or something like that. But you said about training load management straight away, and this is something that takes no talent to do. It doesn't need any of us to really hone in on it. Really, sometimes it can come from the boxing side as well, in terms of like taking session amount of minutes times RPE. It's pretty. Yeah. You can see when it's a high day and a low day, really, get them athletes taking ownership of that.
And I haven't got data on it, but anecdotally, I'd say there's 2 higher risk areas for viewers to be aware of. Is week 1, and then just like pre and during peak. So as they come straight back into to boxing again, that week I often find is when you get those little niggles because they're still running, they're still lifting, and they've started boxing, and little things show their face. So again, being proactive, not reactive in that prior week. So are they ready to be hitting the bag? Are they ready to? Obviously maybe not sparring week 1, but and then that peak week just coming in. Okay, have you as an S&C coach, have you taken your foot off the pedal because it's a big sparring week? Is their rest optimal? Is their anabolic system ideal growth hormone levels, and are they nurtured and recovering well at night so that they're really giving that hormonal system the best chance of recovery? So, and again, just how we can just monitor and keep an eye on that as a team as 2 risk factors that I think is good to bear in mind, and you can't necessarily always prevent issues. It's the nature of the sport, so it's just being able to sort of look out for it.